Hi guys, welcome to the Headphone Show. For today's video, I'm going to review the HiFiMAN Susvara. This is a planar magnetic over-ear open-back headphone, and this is the most expensive headphone that I've ever reviewed. This costs $6,000. So let's take a look. As with all of my other reviews, we're going to go through the build quality, design, and comfort, the technical performance, so detail, speed, and dynamics, stage and imaging, and timbre, and then we're also going to go over the tonality and frequency response, and then do some comparisons. But first, let's talk about this a little bit. This unit was actually sent to me by one of the community members, so you know who you are, and thank you so much for sending this along for review. And if anybody's wondering what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link in the description below, where you guys can check out the headphone community and see what everybody else is saying about this headphone as well. Now, the person who sent this to me for evaluation also sent along a number of pads to pad swap and see how that goes. So I'll talk about that a little bit in this review as well. And before going further, I also have to mention that this headphone requires a ton of power. This is the most power hungry headphone that I've evaluated, and some people say that it actually benefits a lot from a speaker amplifier rather than the headphone amplifiers that we might be used to using. I ran this off of the SPL Phonitor X in balanced mode, and then I also ran this off of the Cayenne IHA6, also in balanced mode. It did require high gain. With the IHA6 on high gain, I found that it powered it just fine. I didn't have to go, beyond 12 o'clock for volume. I was usually right around 10 o'clock, so I still had plenty of volume left to go there. I also have to mention that the person who sent this to me sent along a balanced cable. This uses a 2.5mm connector here for the cups, and they uses EMF cable that was terminated in 4-pin balanced. So I was running this balanced off of very powerful solid-state amplifiers 100% of the time. So if anybody has it in their mind that they want to get, the flagship Susvara, keep in mind that you will also need to run it with a fairly powerful amplifier as well. All right, let's talk about build quality, design, and comfort. I'm impressed. For the build quality, this is better than what I was expecting. Not only does it look nice, I prefer the styling of this over the HE1000 SE. This is all metal, but it's sort of like this brushed matte kind of look to it, which I really like. And I also really like the form factor. It's not perfectly round, but it's more round than it is that sort of longer oval shape that the HE1000 series goes for. And really, there's always that question about HiFiMAN build quality, and to me, this feels solid. I have no problems with the way that this feels, the way that it looks, the way that everything works here. There's no weird creak issues. It feels surprisingly sturdy. Of course, take that with a grain of salt. I have no idea how long this is going to last. I can only really evaluate what's in front of me, and we don't know what the driver failure rates are on this kind of stuff. So your guess is as good as mine on that. But from a look and feel perspective, this is fantastic. For the headband piece, they once again have this somewhat annoying system with the clicks, but because this headphone is not that crazy elongated shape with the cups, it's really easy to get the fit right. I've previously complained about the Aria's headband system where it didn't matter where you put the notch for the headpiece, you could never get it to fit right on the side of your head because it would either be too much or too little. And with this, I have no problems whatsoever getting it to fit right for where the cups would optimally be on the side of your ear. So it wouldn't be too high or too low. And so as much as this is not my preferred headband design, it's functional and it keeps the weight down. And as a result, this is actually a fairly comfortable headphone to wear. For all those other flagships out there, like the crazy high-end stuff like the Abyss AB1266TC or the LCD4 from Odyssey, there's something weird going on with the fit somewhere, or it's really heavy. The Diana Phi has fit issues. And with this, I have absolutely no problems. I don't know, they've nailed it. This is also more comfortable to me than all of their other headphones. Like, all the rest of the HiFiMAN line is not as comfortable as their flagship. The guys at HiFiMAN have done an incredible job with the HiFiMAN have done an incredible job with the comfort here. All right, let's talk about technical performance. So the detail retrieval on this headphone is the best. I mean that. Like, there's nothing that I've heard that is better than this for detail retrieval. Now, I'm thinking that the closest that I've reviewed is probably the LCD4, but I think in reality, the Abyss AB1266TC is the only thing that comes close to this for detail retrieval. And let's say for internal detail retrieval, they might be about the same. And I think a lot of that would also just depend on the source that you're using. So once again, when I say internal detail retrieval, we're talking about textural nuance, structural definition, and clarity for the images that are coming across. And the Susvara makes me go, oh, there's more there than I thought, even when compared to some of the crazy, planar flagships that I've evaluated in the past, like LCD4, like the final D8000 Pro, even the HE1000 SE. I think there is more going on here for that kind of detail retrieval than I'd previously known was possible. But the other part of this, which we will talk about, is that the tonality and frequency response for the Susvara also emphasizes detail and clarity, whereas for some of those other ones, they don't quite, and you have to be specifically paying attention to that sort of internal detail stuff that I talk about. For speed and dynamics, I'm once again blown away. This is fantastic. This is as fast as I've ever heard a headphone for the entirety of the frequency response, so it's not just in one area or another. And the dynamics here, like the slam and punch, let's say, that is also fantastic. This is better than everything else they've done. Maybe not the old HE6, but better than everything else in their lineup currently. So this is both a technically impressive and analytic headphone, but also a fun and lively and punchy sounding headphone as well. Not quite on the same level as some like high excursion dynamic driver headphones, like some of the stuff from ZMF, for example, punches pretty darn hard. And I think a lot of the Focal headphones punch pretty hard as well. So maybe not quite on that level. But yeah, for a planar magnetic headphone, this is surprisingly good for its dynamic impact. I think the LCD4 is just a little bit better on that front than this, but compared to the rest of HiFiMan's lineup, this is still the best. All right, now let's talk about stage and imaging. And yeah, once again, the stage here is fantastic. I don't think this is the widest stage that I've ever heard, or the most speaker-like, let's say, but it's so precise. And importantly, you get the biggest range for depth. So when something is right in front of you, it feels like it's right in front of you, and something's far away, it feels like it's far away. When you're listening to music that has a lot going on, there's busy passages where you might hear something that's really far back in the mix that's being, overshadowed by what's in front. You can hear everything so incredibly well defined that you don't miss anything, and that also leads to the enhanced perception of detail, where you realize now that there's stuff in the mix that you couldn't hear before. And I love it when I get those experiences, even though I've reviewed so many high-end headphones now. I love it when something new shows up, and the Susvara has definitely given me that. There is definitely a sense of, wow, that I didn't realize that was there in the mix, in this track that I've listened to and tested headphones on for years. For timbre, nothing really stands out to me. There's nothing about the Susvara where I go, oh, that sounds metallic or plasticky. It sounds like a planar, very much like a planar. And I think there's an interesting argument there that maybe these high-performance nanoscale planars don't provide the most natural sound. And I think that's probably true to a certain extent. If you compare something like this to a ZMF headphone like the Verite or the Auteur, the timbre there is a more, let's say, natural sound, or probably closer to what something would actually sound like in real life if you were there. But the clarity that you get with something like this makes it so that I wouldn't want to go back. And so while it might not sound as natural as a ZMF headphone, its technical performance makes it worth it, in my opinion. But we also have to talk about the tonality and frequency response. The bass to the mid-range proper is the flattest that I've ever heard. It extends all the way into the sub bass, and that's a good thing. So it doesn't have the Harman shelf. If you wanted to add it, you could. It can absolutely handle it, but I just leave it totally flat there in the bass, no EQ necessary. For the mids, like right at around 2K, there's a bit of a dip there, and this is the standard dip that most HiFiMan headphones tend to go for. I've seen this countless times in other HiFiMan headphones. And I think it's generally agreeable. I think that nobody's going to hear this and go, wow, that sounds really scooped. It's more of just a subtle dip there. And then it comes back up, the energy comes back for your piano tones. You get tons of clarity there for female vocals. There's no problems up into the transition into the treble. And, there's no weird peaks at 5K hertz to cause percussion compression or anything that I worry about. The only thing that occasionally will make certain recordings and certain genres somewhat shrill or sharp sounding is there's a bit of extra energy there at 7K. Now, it's not a peak necessarily, it's just that it's a little bit high there. And so in my mind, it's right on the edge of being sibilant. I don't find it to be sibilant for like 90% of the recordings out there, but occasionally I'll listen to something where I can tell that they haven't put a de-esser on it or something like that, and they haven't paid attention to where the sibilant sounds are a little bit harsh in the recording, and then you do hear that with the Susvara as well. It'll reveal it perfectly. If anything, it just indicates for you that the recording might not be all that well done, but at the same time, it's not too much that it's painful. It's on the right side of that edge. It's just, it gets close to it occasionally. And of course, above the consonant range, you have tons of air here. Not like as much as the HE1000 SE, but I always found that with that headphone, it almost does it too much, right? You can watch my review on that, but like I find that the HE1000 SE, it's just, it goes for broke with treble extension. Same thing with the LCD4, where it's just an unnatural amount of air that throws off the balance for your cymbal hits and stuff like that. With the Susvara, it's not. It's right where it should be. It's focused, highly detailed, and you get that same kind of plankton quality without having it be out of balance with the rest of the frequency response, without having it be out of balance with the primary hits for your cymbals. It doesn't overemphasize the sizzle and splash quality. It puts it right where it should be, the way that you would naturally hear it in real life. And so the general curve here is a little bit bright relative to the Harman target, but not quite as bright relative to something like a diffuse field target, maybe a little bit warmer there. And it fits right in between. So it's really close to my ideal tonality here. Once again, the only thing that I would change at all would be maybe just a little bit less there at around 7K hertz. But I don't. It's not enough where I care. Now, with the pads, the person who sent this to me also sent these along. So when I measured this on the same rig with these pads that have this sort of perforation going on here, there was a little bit more bass emphasis, and then the mid-range, let's say, linearity extended a little bit further up, so it didn't drop down as quickly. But then I also found that with these ones, there was maybe a little bit more energy there at around 7K. It could have just been, you know, positioning inconsistencies, but I measured these a bunch of different times at different positions, and it didn't really change that much. So I personally prefer these pads here, the stock ones, but I could see why somebody would want to do this mod, because then you do get a little bit more bass energy there if you want it. If you want it to be a little closer to Harman, this might do it for you. All right, so let's do a few comparisons. Compared to the Odyssey LCD4, the LCD4 is still one of the absolute best headphones for detail retrieval. I think the Susvara is at least as good, if not better, because of its tonality. And the frequency response here makes it so that you have all the clarity that the LCD4 is missing throughout the upper mid-range and lower treble. So you get that here in the Susvara, even though there's a bit of a dip, but that's a little further down into the mids. Your 3 to 5K hertz range for the Susvara is not as withdrawn as it is on the Odyssey LCD4. And then on top of it, it has a much better tonal balance for the region above, 10K hertz. So it's not overdoing the splash and sizzle quality. The stage is also bigger here on the Susvara. Not a ton bigger, but it is bigger. And it is also a little bit more precise sounding to me. The only area where the LCD4 might beat this is in that slam and punch quality. But for just about everything else, I think the Susvara is the better headphone. The other crazy high-end planar headphone to compare this against is the Final Audio D8000 Pro. And this is once again more comfortable than the D8000 Pro. It is a little bit lighter. The tonality for the D8000 Pro is also excellent, but I think that the Susvara has better technical performance. So I actually think that both speed and detail retrieval in Susvara are a little bit better than that one. Compared to the Abyss AB1266TC, I only got a chance to try that at CanJam, so it's not really a fair comparison. I'd have to get that one in for review at some point and do like a proper evaluation and comparison to be able to judge whether one's better than the other. But from those impressions that I had, remember, that's show condition, so it's not really that accurate. That's the only headphone that I can really think of that would compete with this one. So I don't really feel confident saying that, one is better than the other. Same thing with the DMS modded Diana Phi. You really got to appreciate what he's done with that headphone. So hopefully I'll get a chance to review that one as well and get a proper sense of it in the future. Compared to the ZMF Verite, so while the Verite might be better for being natural sounding, the Susvara is definitely better for detail retrieval and instrument separation. Why drive a car like that? Compared to the Head Audio headphone, that one has been making waves, deservedly so, because it also is ridiculously good for technical performance and textural qualities. That is a very similar space and stage character to it, but I think the Susvara may go further in front of me, whereas the headphone is more kind of like out to the sides. Same thing with the Verite. The Verite is more out to the sides, and the Susvara is more, in front, and then also to the sides as well. Compared to the Focal Utopia, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I actually think this has more detail retrieval than the Utopia. The Utopia might slam harder, but the bass for the Susvara extends better, whereas with the Utopia it does roll off a bit. But the tonality there, I mean, they're both quite agreeable for music with instruments, classical music, jazz music, acoustic music, and they'll both reveal all the flaws if it's a poorly recorded track. I think if you wanted a headphone that was a flagship but a more normal headphone, the Utopia would be a great choice. But if you wanted the absolute pinnacle of technical performance, the Susvara, I think, does do a better job. Of course, that's a dynamic versus a planar, and it's really tough to compare because they do sound so different and they have different characteristics to them. But for strict detail retrieval capabilities, that internal detail, as I like to call it, yeah, I think that the Susvara does it better. Same with space and stage. I think the Susvara has better space and stage characteristics going on. So, in conclusion, do I recommend the HiFiMAN Susvara? Well, this is a $6,000 headphone, and for anybody who is hearing me gush about a $6,000 headphone and is thinking to themselves, well, you could buy a car with that money, my recommendation is to buy a car. But for anybody who's looking for the flagship and they just want to get, you know, the best headphone that money could buy, regardless of how much it costs, that is this headphone. It's that for me. This is what I would buy. If I had all the money that I could, you know, possibly throw at a headphone and amplifier and whatever, this would be the headphone that I would get. Because this is a headphone that is comfortable enough where you can wear it for long periods of time. It matches or exceeds every other headphone that I've heard for technical ability, so for detail retrieval and soundstage and whatever else, right? And then importantly, it doesn't do something weird with the tonality. You know, I've been constantly trying to find this perfect planar headphone that's been this elusive thing for me because every other planar that I've tried, there's been something weird with it. Either it's too heavy or, you know, there's something weird going on with the tonal balance that just throws it off. It goes for broke with the extension quality. There's too much air. There's not enough, you know, upper mid-range clarity. There's just something weird. There's always a trade-off. And this is the first time. This is the first one, the first nanoscale flagship planar that I've used that doesn't have any of those issues. And so in my mind, if I were to buy a flagship headphone that would be spare no expense, it would be this headphone. So yes, I absolutely recommend the HiFiMAN Susvara. All right, that does it for this video. If you guys like what I do, consider subscribing, but I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.